In this video, we're not just telling a story, we're revealing a chilling lesson from the unforgiving waters of the Indian Ocean. One American sailor, experienced and prepared, made a single wrong decision, and it cost him everything. This isn't just about tragedy. It's about understanding how even the smallest mistake at sea can spiral into a life-or-death situation. From misjudging weather systems to trusting gear past its limits, this story exposes the hidden dangers that every sailor must take seriously. We'll walk you through the critical moment, the warning signs he didn't see or chose to ignore, and the fatal consequence that followed. But more importantly, we'll break down what should have happened instead. These are the kinds of lessons that save lives. If you sail, live aboard, or dream of crossing oceans, this is the kind of story you can't afford to miss. Stay with us until the end, reflect on the choices made, and ask yourself, would you have done the same? He thought he was ready. His boat was sound, his route well planned, and his experience solid. But in the vast, unforgiving waters of the Indian Ocean, one wrong decision was all it took. This is the story of John Smith, an American sailor whose journey turned fatal, not because of a storm or a failing hull, but because of a single overlooked choice. We'll take you deep into the story, breaking down exactly what went wrong, how it could have been avoided, and what every sailor, no matter how experienced, needs to learn from this tragedy. From risk assessment and route planning to emergency readiness and mental focus. This story goes beyond storytelling. It's a wake-up call for anyone who ventures offshore. We'll explore the critical moment that sealed his fate, the chain of decisions that led there, and the key safety principles that might have changed the outcome. Because out at sea, every choice counts, and sometimes there are no second chances. Stay with us, because this isn't just about one sailor. It's about all of us who sail, and by understanding his mistake, we might just avoid making our own. John Smith, a 45-year-old Californian, was always driven by the call of the sea. Since his early 20s, he had sailed along the west coast of the United States, logging thousands of nautical miles on vessels of all sizes. In 2015, he crossed the Pacific with a crew, an experience that profoundly shaped him, planting the seed for a grander dream. To circumnavigate the globe, alone, aboard a sailboat, he would prepare himself. In 2021, John acquired the Sea Dreamer, a West Sail 32, an icon of American sailing known for its ruggedness and reliability in ocean crossings. Built in 1976, the boat was 32 feet long, with an 11-foot beam and a displacement of 19,500 pounds, featuring a solid fiberglass hull and a long keel that ensured stability in rough seas. The Sea Dreamer was powered by a 50-horsepower Perkins 4-108 diesel engine, with 70-gallon fuel tanks and 85-gallon water tanks, and boasted a sail area of 753 square feet, rigged as a cutter with a mainsail, genoa, and staysail. John spent 2 years preparing the boat for the journey. He installed a Spectra Ventura 150 water maker, capable of producing 6 gallons of potable water per hour, critical for long stretches without resupply. For power, he added 2 100-watt solar panels and a 400-watt air breeze wind generator, feeding a 300-amp-hour lithium battery. The navigation system included a Raymarine Axiom 9 chart plotter, radar, AIS, automatic identification system, and an ICOM M506 VHF radio with DSC. For offshore communication, John relied on an Iridium Go satellite phone, enabling calls, texts, and weather updates. Safety was a priority. The boat was equipped with an ACR Global Fix 5.4 EPIRB, emergency position indicating radio beacon, a Viking Rescue 4-person life raft, inflatable life jackets with harnesses, and a set of emergency flares. He also upgraded the steering system with a Raymarine EV 200 autopilot and a monitor wind vane, and installed a 44-pound Rockna anchor with 200 feet of galvanized chain for secure anchoring. John's route was meticulously planned, following trade winds and avoiding cyclone-prone areas. He departed San Francisco on June 15, 2023, sailing down the coast to the Panama Canal, which he transited in July. From Panama, he headed to the Marquesas Islands in the South Pacific, covering 3,000 nautical miles in 21 days. He then passed through Tahiti, Fiji, and arrived in Fremantle, Australia, on November 10th. The next leg was the Indian Ocean crossing, one of the most daunting for sailors due to the strong winds of the roaring 40s and unpredictable seas. His destination was Cape Town, South Africa, 5,500 miles away, with a planned stop at the Cocos Keeling Islands for resupply. John knew the Indian Ocean demanded respect. He studied nautical charts, analyzed weather patterns, and consulted guides like Jimmy Cornell's World Cruising Routes, a staple among circumnavigators. Yet nothing prepared him for the moment that would change everything. On December 5, 2023, the Sea Dreamer was sailing at 40 degrees south, 1,000 miles west of Australia, in a remote region where help was days away. The wind blew at 15 to 20 knots, with occasional gusts, and waves reached 6 to 8 feet, moderate conditions but requiring vigilance. John was exhausted. After 5 months at sea, solitude weighed heavily. He kept a log, writing about the beauty of the stars and the anguish of not hearing another human voice for weeks. Fatigue, combined with the pressure to maintain his schedule, began to cloud his judgment. That morning, he noticed that the mainsail halyard, a 5/8-inch diameter line, was frayed with visible broken strands. If the halyard snapped, the mainsail would collapse, compromising his ability to sail efficiently and risking damage to the mast. It was a serious issue, but not immediate. He could have lowered the sail, used the staysail, or motored until calmer conditions prevailed. But John made a different choice. He decided to climb the mast to replace the halyard. It was a task he had done before, in harbors or calm seas, but never in conditions like these. He trusted his strength and agility, honed over years of sailing and climbing. The Sea Dreamer had mast steps, but John chose not to use a safety harness, reasoning that the boat's motion would make climbing with a line cumbersome. He tied a new line to his belt, grabbed a Leatherman multi-tool, and began the ascent. The boat rocked with the waves, and the wind whistled through the rigging. With each step, he felt the mast sway, but he pressed on, focused on the task. At 30 feet up near the top, a larger wave struck the boat on the beam, causing the Sea Dreamer to lurch sharply. John lost his balance. His hand slipped, and he fell, striking the deck before rolling into the sea. The impact knocked him unconscious. Despite his inflatable life jacket, which deployed automatically, he couldn't swim back. The Sea Dreamer, awash on autopilot, sailed on, leaving John behind in the cold waters of the Indian Ocean. Days later, a freighter spotted the Sea Dreamer adrift, with the mainsail partially lowered and no sign of occupants. The Australian Coast Guard was alerted, but found no trace of John. The EPIRB wasn't activated, likely because he had no time to reach it. His last position, logged by the AIS, showed he was alone, with no chance of rescue in one of the planet's most isolated regions. The tragedy stunned the sailing community, reigniting debates about safety in solo voyages. What led John to make that fatal decision? To understand, we must revisit his profile and preparation. He was a meticulous sailor, trained by the American Sailing Association, ASA, in navigation, meteorology, boat maintenance, and offshore first aid. He regularly practiced emergency scenarios, like man-overboard drills, using a dummy to simulate rescues. Before departing, he overhauled the boat's systems, replacing lines, sails, and electrical connections. But there were subtle flaws in his planning. He underestimated the psychological toll of prolonged solitude, which can lead to impulsive decisions. He also failed to anticipate the need for more frequent rigging inspections on long voyages, especially in high wind conditions. The mainsail halyard, though new before departure, suffered accelerated wear from constant salt exposure and friction. Solitude played a critical role. In his log found on the boat, John wrote, "Sometimes I feel it, the sea testing me, like it wants to know how far I can go." The pressure to complete the crossing on schedule, combined with exhaustion, created fertile ground for error. He could have waited a few hours, monitored the halyard, and sailed with smaller sails. Instead, he chose to act immediately, prioritizing progress over safety. This decision reflects a common dilemma among solo sailors, the struggle between the need to move forward and the caution the sea demands. Technically, the halyard issue was preventable. The line, made of high-tenacity polyester braid, should be inspected every 500 hours of use, per manuals like those from New England Ropes. John, over 5 months of continuous sailing, accumulated about 3,600 hours of exposure, but didn't log detailed inspections. When he noticed the wear, his diagnosis was correct, but his solution was reckless. Climbing the mast in a sea with 6 to 8 foot waves without a harness violated guidelines from U.S. Sailing, which stressed the use of safety lines and climbing harnesses, even in calm conditions. He could have used a pulley system to hoist a new line without climbing, a technique outlined in guides like the Annapolis Book of Seamanship. His choice to climb reflects overconfidence fueled by experience, but clouded by fatigue that dulled his risk assessment. The consequences of the fall were compounded by the lack of a recovery system. The Sea Dreamer had a man overboard (MOB) device, but John didn't activate it before climbing. A simple system, like a tether line attached to his life jacket, could have kept him connected to the boat. Additionally, the autopilot, set to hold course, caused the boat to sail away quickly. In solo sailing, experienced sailors recommend disabling the autopilot during hazardous tasks, allowing the boat to drift and aiding recovery. John, however, kept the system engaged, sealing his fate. This tragedy echoes historical sailing events. In 2009, 72-year-old Slovenian sailor Jurij Sturk vanished in the Indian Ocean during a solo circumnavigation. His boat, the Lunatic, was found adrift, with no sign of him, possibly after a fall or structural failure. Cases like these underscore the vulnerability of solo sailors, even the most seasoned. Maritime culture, rooted in figures like Joshua Slocum, the first to sail alone around the world from 1895 to 1898, celebrates self-reliance, but also teaches respect for the sea. In his book, Sailing Alone Around the World, Slocum recounts near disasters, like losing his rudder in a storm and improvising a fix with spare parts. John, in contrast, had no time to improvise. John's story offers critical lessons for sailors. First, the importance of preventive maintenance. Lines, sails, and fittings must be inspected regularly, especially on long voyages. A maintenance schedule, like that suggested by Cruising World, recommends checking rigging every 1,000 miles or 30 days of sailing. Second, safety equipment is non-negotiable. A climbing harness, like the Black Diamond Momentum, tethered to a safety line, would have prevented the fall. Third, psychological preparation is as vital as technical skill. Solo sailors should practice stress management techniques like meditation or daily routines to maintain mental clarity. Finally, emergency systems like EPIRBS and personal locator beacons must be accessible. John carried an EPIRB on deck but not a personal beacon on his life jacket, which could have alerted rescuers instantly. For emergency procedures, the U.S. Coast Guard recommends training for man-overboard scenarios, even in solo sailing. A simple drill involves tossing a float and attempting to recover it, timing the process. For mass falls, the Royal Yachting Association suggests a 2-to-1 pulley system, allowing a sailor to be hoisted by another or self-rescue in an emergency. John, sailing alone, lacked this option but could have installed an automatic recovery system, like a retractable rope ladder on deck. Maritime culture also shapes preparation. In sailing communities, like those on forums such as Sailboat Owners, there's a saying, the sea doesn't forgive mistakes, but it gives you time to fix them, if you're prepared. John had the tools but not the time. His story reminds sailors that preparation extends beyond the boat. It involves knowing your limits, respecting sea conditions, and never underestimating the power of a single choice. To engage the audience, this story can conclude with reflective questions. Have you ever faced a moment at sea where you had to choose between safety and progress? How would you prepare for a long crossing, considering psychological challenges? What safety measures would you implement to avoid an incident like John's? These questions, paired with insights from experienced sailors, like those at events such as the Annapolis Boat Show, can reinforce the message. A sailor interviewed in 2023 said, "Solo sailing is like playing chess with the ocean. You need to think 3 moves ahead or you're done." John Smith's tragedy is not just a story of loss. It's a reminder that the sea, for all its beauty, demands humility. Every line, every knot, every decision matters. When he climbed that mast, John trusted his skill, but forgot the oldest rule of sailing. The sea always has the final say. May his story teach us to listen more closely, plan more carefully, and sail with greater respect. Because in the vast Indian Ocean, or any sea, the line between adventure and tragedy is as thin as the halyard he tried to fix.